I just need a boyfriend for tomorrow. The plus-size maid whispered through trembling tears, unaware someone had heard every word. She ended the call, turned around, and walked straight into the mafia boss. Neither of them spoke. The next morning, black luxury cars stopped outside the nursing home. Damien DeMarco stepped out, walked toward Phoebe, took her hand, and softly said, "Sorry I'm late, sweetheart." Phoebe's heart nearly stopped. For several seconds, Phoebe Sullivan forgot how to speak. Damien's hand stayed wrapped around hers, warm and steady, while 3 black cars idled behind him. 2 men in dark suits stood near the curb with the unmistakable posture of people who did not spend their mornings visiting grandmothers. Phoebe stared at Damien. "What are you doing here?" Her whisper came out sharper than she intended. Damien barely glanced at her. "You said you needed a boyfriend." Her stomach dropped. So he had heard everything. Before she could recover, the nursing home doors opened. "Phoebe?" Evelyn Sullivan stood in the lobby, one hand resting on her walker. Her face lit up the instant she saw her granddaughter, and then her gaze slid to the tall, impeccably dressed man holding Phoebe's hand. Phoebe felt every sensible thought abandon her. "Grandma, I can explain." Damien squeezed her fingers once. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't possessive. It felt strangely like reassurance. Then the most feared man Phoebe had ever worked for smiled at her grandmother. "You must be Evelyn." Evelyn's eyes widened. "And you must be the mysterious fiancé she refuses to tell me anything about." Phoebe nearly choked. Damien didn't. He stepped forward and offered Evelyn his hand with the same calm confidence he brought into boardrooms. "Damien DeMarco." Evelyn looked from him to Phoebe, then back again. "DeMarco?" Phoebe braced herself. "Yes, ma'am. The man Phoebe works for." A dangerous silence followed. Phoebe opened her mouth. Damien answered first. "That's how we met." "Technically true." Phoebe shot him a horrified look. Evelyn, however, looked delighted. "Well, don't stand there like strangers. Come inside. I've waited months to meet you." Months, the word stabbed Phoebe with guilt. She had never meant for the lie to survive this long. It had started after her last relationship ended, back when Evelyn was already sick and terrified of leaving Phoebe alone. One harmless reassurance had turned into another, until somehow an imaginary boyfriend had become an imaginary fiancé. Now her very real employer was walking beside Evelyn as if none of this were insane. Inside Evelyn's room, Phoebe cornered Damien near the window while her grandmother searched for an old photograph. "You need to leave." "No." Phoebe blinked. "No?" "She's happy. That doesn't make this normal. Neither does inventing a fiancé." Phoebe's cheeks burned. "I panicked. I noticed." There was no mockery in his voice. That somehow made it worse. Across the room, Evelyn turned around holding a photograph. Damien immediately stepped away from Phoebe, his expression shifting with such effortless composure that she wondered how many impossible situations he had talked his way through. Evelyn handed him the photograph. It showed Phoebe at 11 years old, missing a front tooth, wearing a crooked homemade crown. "Oh, no." Phoebe groaned. Damien studied it seriously. "She hasn't changed much." Evelyn laughed. Phoebe stared at him. "I had no front tooth. I was referring to the crown." That made Evelyn laugh harder. And against every instinct telling her this was a disaster, Phoebe laughed too. For the next 20 minutes, Damien did something even more unsettling than pretending convincingly. He listened. When Evelyn talked about Phoebe working 2 jobs after college, Damien listened. When she described how Phoebe once drove 3 hours because Evelyn claimed a light bulb needed changing, he listened. When Evelyn teased that her granddaughter pretended not to worry about everyone, Damien looked at Phoebe as though he were quietly filing the information away. "No phone." No impatience. No glance at his watch. The chairman, who could make an entire room go silent just by entering it, sat beside an elderly woman and asked about her favorite flowers. Phoebe could not understand him. Finally, a nurse arrived with Evelyn's medication. Phoebe seized the chance and followed Damien into the hallway. "Thank you," she whispered. "Seriously, you saved me. But you've done enough." Damien looked through the doorway at Evelyn, still smiling, then back at Phoebe. "You told your sister you needed a boyfriend for one day." Phoebe swallowed. "Yes." His expression stayed perfectly calm. "The day isn't over." Before she could argue, Evelyn called from inside. "Damien, sweetheart, are you staying for lunch?" Phoebe silently begged him to say no. Damien held her gaze for one long second. Then he walked back into the room. "I'd be delighted." Phoebe remained frozen in the hallway. Apparently, Damien DeMarco hadn't come merely to rescue her from one lie. For reasons she couldn't begin to understand, he intended to stay. Lunch revealed something Phoebe had never expected to discover about Damien DeMarco: the man was a terrible liar. Evelyn insisted they eat in the nursing home's small family dining room, where a vase of artificial roses stood between them and Damien looked absurdly elegant beside a plastic water pitcher. Phoebe sat across from him, watching disaster approach one question at a time. "So," Evelyn began cheerfully, "how long have you two been together?" Phoebe nearly dropped her fork. Damien calmly cut a piece of chicken. "Not long enough." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds suspiciously romantic." Phoebe kicked Damien under the table. His expression didn't change. "Phoebe prefers privacy." Another kick. "I've noticed," Evelyn said. "She told me almost nothing about you." "That was probably wise." Phoebe stared at him. Evelyn laughed. "At least you're honest." Damien glanced at Phoebe, and for one dangerous second, amusement flickered in his eyes. Phoebe suddenly realized he was enjoying this. The thought was outrageous. This was Damien DeMarco, the man whose arrival at the estate could silence 20 employees without a single word. Yet here he was, letting an 80-year-old woman interrogate him about romance. Then Evelyn asked the question Phoebe had been dreading. "What does my granddaughter like most about you?" Damien finally paused. Phoebe almost smiled. "Got you." He could negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions. He could terrify men twice his size. But no amount of power could produce an answer to a question about a relationship that didn't exist. Damien set down his fork. "You should ask her." Phoebe's smile disappeared. Evelyn turned immediately. "Well." Phoebe searched desperately for something believable. "He's punctual." Damien raised one eyebrow. Evelyn stared at her. "Punctual?" "He respects schedules." "I see. And he's very organized." "Phoebe," Evelyn said gently, "you're describing an accountant." Damien lowered his gaze, but Phoebe caught the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. "You think this is funny?" she whispered. "A little." It was the first time she had ever heard him admit to being amused. Strangely, she wanted to hear it again. After lunch, Evelyn grew tired, so Phoebe expected Damien to finally leave. Instead, when Evelyn mentioned wanting fresh air, Damien personally pushed her wheelchair into the garden. His security detail followed at such a careful distance that Evelyn eventually leaned toward Phoebe. "Are those men always with him?" Phoebe hesitated. Damien answered without turning around. "They worry." Evelyn nodded sympathetically. "You must be difficult to manage." Phoebe covered a laugh with a cough. Damien looked over his shoulder. For perhaps the first time since Phoebe had met him, she saw him completely outnumbered. Evelyn noticed too. She grinned. The afternoon turned unexpectedly easy. Evelyn told embarrassing stories about Phoebe.
Damien listened to every single one.
Phoebe learned that Damien hated overly sweet coffee, because Evelyn insisted on ordering drinks for everyone and grilled him about his preferences. When Evelyn complained that Phoebe never rested, Damien said quietly, "I've noticed that."
Those 3 words unsettled Phoebe more than all his pretending had. He had noticed.
She had assumed she was nearly invisible to him at the estate, one employee among dozens, moving through rooms built for people wealthier and more important than she would ever be.
Apparently she had been wrong.
Later, while Evelyn spoke with a nurse, Phoebe pulled Damien aside. "You've officially survived lunch.
Your work here is done." "So you've said."
Damien. It was the first time she had used his first name without thinking.
Both of them noticed. Phoebe lowered her voice. "You don't have to keep doing this."
His gaze settled on her face.
"I know."
The answer stopped her.
"Not I promised, not your grandmother needs this, simply, I know."
Before Phoebe could ask what that meant, Evelyn called them over.
She wanted a photograph.
Phoebe stiffened as Damien stepped beside her. "This is unnecessary," she murmured.
"Smile." "Don't order me to smile." "Then don't." The nurse raised the phone. At the last second, Damien's hand settled lightly against Phoebe's back. Not gripping. Not claiming. Just there. Phoebe looked up at him instinctively.
The photograph caught that exact moment, not Phoebe smiling at the camera, not Damien performing for Evelyn, but Phoebe looking startled and Damien looking down at her.
Evelyn studied the photograph afterward for several quiet seconds.
A knowing softness crossed her face.
Phoebe didn't notice, she was too busy trying to understand why Damien's hand had stayed on her back several seconds after the picture was already taken. By Monday morning, the photograph Evelyn had insisted on taking felt impossible to forget.
Phoebe returned to the DeMarco estate determined to restore the natural order of things.
She was an employee. Damien was her employer.
The nursing home had been an extraordinary act of kindness, nothing more.
That explanation held until she walked into the breakfast room and found Damien drinking black coffee. He looked up.
"Your grandmother called me."
Phoebe stopped walking. "What?" "She thanked me for yesterday." Phoebe closed her eyes. "Please tell me she didn't ask when you're visiting again." "She asked what I wanted for dinner on Sunday." Phoebe groaned. Damien calmly returned to his coffee.
"You could have told her you're busy."
"I did." "Good." "I moved a meeting."
Her eyes snapped open.
"You what?" Damien said nothing more.
Phoebe stared at him, trying to understand why a man who guarded every minute of his schedule had rearranged one for a woman he had met only the day before. That evening, she found him alone in the library, the same room where he had overheard her call.
For several seconds neither mentioned it.
Then Phoebe set a stack of books on the table.
"Why?" Damien looked up from the document in front of him. "You'll need to be more specific. Why are you still doing this?" His expression gave nothing away.
Phoebe pressed on before she lost her nerve. "You helped me yesterday, more than helped me.
You saved me from hurting someone I love. I'll always be grateful for that." She hesitated. "But moving meetings, going back for dinner, that's not rescuing me from an awkward morning anymore." Damien's gaze dropped briefly to the table. For once, he didn't have an immediate answer. Phoebe noticed. "There's something you're not telling me." Silence settled between them. Finally, Damien closed the folder. "My grandmother raised me." Phoebe had expected many answers. Not that one. Damien leaned back slightly.
"She was the only person in my family who never cared what I became, what I owned, or what people thought of my name." His voice stayed controlled, but something beneath it had shifted. "She wanted one thing before she died."
Phoebe waited. "To see me come home because I wanted to be there." Not because there was business to handle. He looked toward the dark window. She asked me to visit one Sunday. Phoebe's voice softened. And you couldn't? I could. That answer hurt more. I chose a meeting instead. Damien didn't dramatize the words. He simply let them sit.
She died 3 days later.
Phoebe slowly sat in the chair across from him. There was nothing useful to say.
No comforting sentence could rewrite the arithmetic of regret: one meeting, one missed Sunday, a lifetime afterward to remember both.
I'm sorry, she said. Damien nodded once. When I heard you talking to your sister, I recognized something. What?
The sound of someone trying to negotiate with time.
Phoebe's eyes burned.
Suddenly the black cars, the ridiculous boyfriend performance, the lunch, even his willingness to be interrogated by Evelyn, all made sense.
You weren't helping me. I was. But not only me. No. Phoebe looked down at her hands.
For 4 months she had believed Damien DeMarco possessed the kind of coldness only available to men who could buy everything.
Now she wondered if she had mistaken discipline for emptiness.
You know, she said quietly, Grandma would probably tell you guilt is a terrible way to honor someone.
A faint change crossed his face. You've known her 1 day and you're already quoting her?
She has strong opinions.
She does.
Phoebe smiled despite herself. Then Damien added, she also told me you're terrible at accepting help.
Phoebe's smile vanished. She said that? In detail. I'm changing her phone number. For the first time, Damien laughed. It was quiet and brief, but real. Phoebe stared. The sound transformed him more than any smile ever had.
He noticed her staring and the laughter faded, but the warmth didn't disappear completely.
Phoebe stood to leave, then stopped by the door. Damien? He looked at her. Go Sunday. His brow furrowed. To Evelyn's dinner. Phoebe explained. Not because you owe your grandmother something. Not because you owe me something.
She gave him a small smile.
Go because you want to. Then she left him alone in the library.
Damien sat motionless for a long time.
3 urgent messages sat on his desk, waiting for answers. He ignored all of them.
Instead, he opened his calendar.
Sunday evening was already empty.
By Tuesday afternoon, the story had spread through the DeMarco estate.
Phoebe didn't know who had started it.
She only knew that conversations stopped when she entered rooms.
2 kitchen assistants suddenly became fascinated by a bowl of fruit.
A footman who normally joked with her avoided her eyes entirely. Even Gloria Reed watched Phoebe with a new expression, one that suggested a boundary had been crossed. Gloria found her polishing the dining room silver.
Mr. DeMarco didn't hire you to become entertainment for the household. Phoebe kept working. I wasn't aware I had. You know exactly what I mean.
Phoebe placed another spoon carefully beside the others.
Gloria stepped closer.
Women like you make one mistake whenever powerful men show them kindness.
Phoebe finally looked up. What mistake is that? They imagine kindness means equality. The insult landed exactly where Gloria intended. Phoebe refused to show it. My work is finished in here. Is there something else you need? Gloria's mouth tightened. Before she could answer, heels clicked across the marble floor. Cassandra Blake entered. Phoebe had seen Damien's fiancée only twice before.
Cassandra was always immaculate, elegant enough to make expensive rooms seem ordinary. Today, though, anger sharpened every graceful feature.
Leave us, Cassandra told Gloria. Gloria obeyed immediately. Phoebe didn't move. Cassandra set her handbag on the table. Damien canceled a meeting Sunday. Phoebe's stomach tightened. I don't manage Mr. DeMarco's calendar. No. Apparently you manage his attention. Phoebe set down the cloth.
I followed him, Cassandra continued. That surprised her. I saw the nursing home. I saw him holding your hand.
Phoebe's first instinct wasn't fear for herself. It was Evelyn. Whatever Cassandra thought of her, Phoebe could endure it. What she couldn't endure was Evelyn learning the truth through an angry stranger.
My grandmother is ill, Phoebe said. What happened had nothing to do with you.
Cassandra laughed once. Nothing to do with me? I'm his fiancée. Phoebe's face warmed. There is nothing between Damien and me. Using his first name was a mistake. Cassandra heard it.
Her eyes hardened.
Damien, Phoebe said nothing. Cassandra stepped closer. 4 months in this house and suddenly the maid needs a wealthy boyfriend? That's not what happened. Then explain it.
Phoebe couldn't, not without exposing Evelyn's illness, the lie, and Damien's private kindness. Cassandra mistook her silence for guilt. You lied about having a fiancé, and when Damien overheard you, you saw an opportunity. Phoebe's fingers curled around the polishing cloth.
You can insult me if that makes you feel better.
But leave my grandmother out of this.
Cassandra smiled coldly.
So the lie is true.
Phoebe's silence answered enough.
I wonder how your grandmother would feel if someone told her.
That crossed the line. Phoebe stood.
For the first time, Cassandra had to look directly into the eyes of the woman she had dismissed as merely a servant.
You will not use a sick woman to punish me. Cassandra's smile disappeared. Phoebe's voice stayed steady. Whatever you think I've done, you can say it to me. You can call me a liar. You can remind me I clean this house for a living.
But you do not get to frighten my grandmother because you're angry with Damien.
The room went silent. Gloria had returned to the doorway. Several employees stood behind her. Cassandra noticed the audience. Humiliation curdled into cruelty.
Don't confuse one afternoon of attention with importance, Phoebe.
Men like Damien don't marry women who carry their laundry upstairs. Phoebe felt the words. She refused to bend beneath them.
No, she said quietly. Women like me just wash the shirts women like you expect to appear clean. Someone near the doorway inhaled sharply.
Cassandra's face changed. Phoebe picked up the silver tray.
If you'll excuse me, I have work to do.
She walked past Cassandra without lowering her head.
Only when she reached the servants' corridor did her hands begin trembling. She hated that Cassandra's words had hurt. Worse, she hated that part of her wondered whether they were true. Behind her, Gloria's voice cut through the corridor.
You'll report to the East Wing tomorrow. No guest areas until I decide otherwise. Phoebe stopped. It was punishment. Everyone knew it. Still, she nodded. Understood. Neither woman noticed the man standing at the far end of the corridor.
Damien had returned 20 minutes earlier, and judging by the look on his face, he had heard enough.
Gloria. One word stopped everyone. Phoebe turned.
Damien stood at the end of the corridor, his coat still buttoned from outside.
He didn't look angry. That was worse. Gloria straightened immediately. Mr. DeMarco. Why is Miss Sullivan being reassigned? Gloria hesitated.
There have been concerns about appropriate boundaries among the staff.
Whose concerns? Her confidence weakened. Cassandra appeared behind Phoebe. Mine. Damien's gaze shifted to his fiancée. Cassandra walked toward him as though the matter were already settled. This has gone far enough, Damien.
She's lied to everyone, manipulated her way into your personal life, and now the entire household is gossiping.
Damien's expression stayed unreadable. Did you threaten her grandmother? Cassandra stopped. Phoebe's breath caught. I asked a question. No.
You threatened to expose something to a woman with a serious heart condition because you wanted to hurt Phoebe. The use of her first name seemed to change the temperature in the corridor.
Cassandra noticed. So did everyone else. You're defending her? I'm describing what happened. She's a maid. Damien looked at Cassandra for several seconds. And?
The single word left her visibly stunned.
Cassandra gave a disbelieving laugh.
You cannot seriously expect me to pretend there's no difference between someone like her and someone like us.
There are several differences. Phoebe's stomach tightened.
Then Damien continued, she works for what she has.
She protects people who can't give her anything in return.
And when you humiliated her in front of an audience, she still showed you more restraint than you've ever shown her.
Cassandra's face went pale. Phoebe could barely move. Damien hadn't called her beautiful.
He hadn't claimed she was special because he wanted her. He had defended the things about herself that Phoebe actually valued, her work, her restraint, her love for Evelyn.
Cassandra looked around at the watching employees.
You're humiliating me for her.
No, Damien said.
Your behavior did that.
Silence. Then Cassandra's eyes narrowed. I'm your fiancé.
Damien's gaze dropped briefly to the diamond on her hand.
Not anymore. Phoebe stopped breathing.
Cassandra stared at him.
You don't mean that. I don't say things I don't mean. Damien, think about what you're doing.
I have.
Cassandra lowered her voice.
You're ending our engagement because of a servant.
No.
His answer came immediately. I'm ending it because I just watched how you treat someone when you believe their position makes them powerless.
No one moved.
Cassandra looked as though he had struck her, though Damien had never raised his voice or taken a single step toward her.
This is insane.
Perhaps.
You'll regret it. Damien's expression didn't change.
I'll take that risk. Cassandra pulled the engagement ring off her finger and set it on a nearby table with shaking hands.
Then she walked away.
Only the sound of her heels remained.
Damien didn't watch her leave.
Instead, he turned toward Gloria. Phoebe felt the entire staff tense.
Miss Sullivan will not be reassigned. Gloria swallowed. Yes, sir.
And no employee in this house will be punished because someone dislikes who they speak to outside working hours.
If you have concerns about her performance, document them.
If you have concerns about her social position, keep them to yourself.
Gloria's face reddened.
Yes, Mr.
DeMarco. Damien looked at the employees gathered behind her. Back to work. The corridor emptied almost instantly. Phoebe remained. So did Damien. For several seconds, neither spoke.
Then Phoebe found her voice.
You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You ended an engagement.
I ended something that should have ended earlier.
Phoebe searched his face. Because of me?
Something shifted in his expression.
No.
The answer should have relieved her.
Instead, it strangely disappointed her. Damien stepped closer, though he left enough space that she never felt cornered. Cassandra was wrong before today.
Today simply made it impossible for me to ignore.
Phoebe looked down. She wasn't wrong about everything. Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. What does that mean?
Phoebe forced herself to say it.
She was right that we don't belong in the same world. For the first time, genuine irritation crossed his face. Phoebe. You're Damien DeMarco. I clean your house. And the same word. The same refusal to accept the hierarchy everyone else treated as law. Phoebe gave a tired smile. You make that sound very simple. No. Other people make it unnecessarily complicated. Her eyes burned unexpectedly. She looked away before he could see. Damien noticed anyway. He didn't touch her. He didn't tell her not to cry. He simply stood beside her until she had control again. Then he picked up the silver tray she had left on the side table. Phoebe stared. What are you doing? Where does this go? She almost laughed. You cannot carry silver through your own mansion. Why? Because you're terrifying. That seems unrelated. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Damien's expression softened. He handed the tray back only when she reached for it. Their fingers touched. Neither moved immediately. For the first time, Phoebe understood something that frightened her far more than Cassandra's insults ever could. Damien was no longer merely protecting a lie. And whatever was growing between them was becoming much harder to pretend didn't exist. By Sunday, Phoebe had made her decision. She could survive Cassandra's contempt. She could survive gossip at the estate. What she couldn't survive was watching Evelyn trust a story that had stopped feeling harmless. So when Phoebe entered her grandmother's room that afternoon, she came alone. Evelyn immediately looked toward the hallway. Where's my handsome future grandson? Phoebe attempted a smile. Grandma, we need to talk. Something in her voice changed Evelyn's expression. She set aside the book in her lap. All right. Phoebe sat beside her. For several seconds, the words refused to come. She had imagined this confession dozens of times. In every version, Evelyn looked disappointed, hurt, maybe frightened. Phoebe took her grandmother's hand. Damien isn't my fiancé. Evelyn said nothing. Phoebe forced herself onward. There was never an engagement. The man I was seeing months ago left. You were already sick, and you kept worrying I'd be alone. I told you everything was fine because I thought it would make you feel better. Her throat tightened. Then one lie became another. She looked down. I kept thinking I'd tell you when you were stronger, but there was always another test, another doctor's appointment, another reason to wait. Evelyn's fingers tightened gently around hers. And Damien? He overheard me talking to my sister. Phoebe gave a broken little laugh. I said I needed a boyfriend for one day. Understanding softened Evelyn's face. The next morning he simply appeared. And called you sweetheart? Phoebe closed her eyes. Yes. That was rather dramatic. Despite everything, Phoebe laughed. Then the guilt returned. I'm sorry. I never wanted to make you feel foolish. At that, Evelyn frowned. Foolish? For believing me. Evelyn stared at her granddaughter. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Oh, Phoebe. I knew from the beginning. Silence. You what? Evelyn's smile widened. I may have a bad heart. My eyes work perfectly well. Phoebe stared at her. You introduced an imaginary fiancé months ago and somehow never produced a photograph, a birthday, a favorite restaurant, or even a convincing story about where you'd met him. Phoebe's mouth fell open. I thought I was protecting you. You were. Evelyn touched her cheek, in your own ridiculous way. Phoebe laughed through sudden tears. So you knew Damien wasn't my fiancé? The moment I saw him. How? Because that man had no idea what your favorite dessert was. Phoebe frowned. That's your evidence? And you looked at him like you'd discovered a tiger in the lobby. Phoebe covered her face. Evelyn chuckled. Then her expression gentled. But something else happened. Phoebe lowered her hands. Evelyn watched her carefully. The lie wasn't convincing. She paused. but the way he looked at you. Phoebe went very still. That part wasn't pretend. Her heart gave an uncomfortable beat. Grandma, I saw the photograph. We were just standing beside each other. No. You were looking at him. Phoebe tried to answer.
Evelyn continued, and he was looking at you as though everyone else in the room had disappeared.
Heat rose into Phoebe's face. You're imagining things.
Perhaps. Evelyn leaned back against her pillow.
But did he end an engagement because someone insulted every maid in the city? Phoebe stared. How do you know about that? I have a telephone. Who told you? Not important. Phoebe groaned. Evelyn's laughter softened into a cough.
Immediately Phoebe reached for her water.
Evelyn drank, waited until her breathing settled, then took Phoebe's hand again. Listen to me. Phoebe did.
I never needed you to find a man before I died. The words hurt, but Evelyn's eyes stayed warm.
I needed to know you understood that being loved should never require you to become smaller. Phoebe swallowed. Evelyn smiled.
And that includes more than your body, sweetheart.
Phoebe's eyes filled. Your dreams. Your laughter. Your opinions. Your dignity. All of you.
A tear slipped down Phoebe's cheek.
Evelyn wiped it away. If Damien wants you, make sure he wants the whole woman. Phoebe managed a shaky smile. And if he doesn't?
Then he has terrible judgment.
Phoebe laughed.
This time, Evelyn joined her.
A quiet knock came from the open doorway. Both women turned. Damien stood there holding a small bouquet of fresh flowers, not roses. Peonies. Evelyn's favorite. Phoebe remembered mentioning that only once.
Damien looked from Evelyn to Phoebe and immediately understood, from her tear-streaked face, that something had happened.
Evelyn smiled at him. Come in, Damien. He hesitated. Is everything all right?
Phoebe looked at her grandmother, then at the man who had remembered the flowers. For the first time since this began, there was nothing left to hide behind.
She knows, Phoebe said. Damien went still. Evelyn calmly pointed toward the empty chair. Yes, I do.
Then she smiled.
And I think it's time the two of you figured out which parts of this story are actually lies. Evelyn gave them exactly 3 minutes before announcing she was tired.
Phoebe knew her grandmother well enough to recognize manipulation when she saw it.
Damien apparently did too. Neither argued.
They left the room together and walked down the quiet hallway. For once, there was no performance waiting at the end of it.
No grandmother to convince.
No lie to protect. No reason for Damien to reach for Phoebe's hand.
That absence felt strangely louder than everything that had come before. At the elevator, Phoebe finally spoke. You're free. Damien looked at her.
From being my boyfriend.
I wasn't aware I was being held hostage. She laughed despite herself. You know what I mean. Yes. The elevator arrived. Neither entered. Phoebe looked down the empty hallway. Grandma knows. Cassandra knows. Half your staff probably knows. So we don't have to pretend anymore. I know.
There it was again, the same answer he had given her before. Only now Phoebe understood how much could hide inside 2 words.
She looked at him. Then why are you still here? Damien went very still.
When he answered, his voice was quieter.
The first morning, I came because of your grandmother. Phoebe waited.
I heard your voice break in the library. His gaze stayed on hers. You were terrified of hurting someone you loved, and I knew exactly what that felt like, realizing time might run out before you fixed something.
Phoebe remembered his grandmother. That was why I went to the nursing home. And after that? Damien paused. After that became less simple. Phoebe's heartbeat changed.
He stepped closer, but not close enough to trap her against the wall. I started noticing when you laughed before you tried to hide it.
I noticed you apologize to furniture when you bump into it. Phoebe blinked. I do not.
You apologized to a table Thursday.
It was an expensive table. The smallest smile touched his mouth, then vanished.
I noticed you protect people, even when protecting them costs you something. His voice softened. And somewhere along the way, I stopped going back to that nursing home because of regret.
Phoebe could barely breathe normally. Why did you keep going?
Because you were there.
Silence filled the hallway. Phoebe wanted the answer. She was also afraid of it. You ended your engagement. Not for you. I know.
But you made it impossible for me to ignore what that relationship had become.
Damien glanced toward Evelyn's door.
And you made several other things impossible to ignore.
Phoebe folded her arms, partly because she needed something to hold on to. This doesn't make sense. Probably not. You're my employer. Yes.
You live in a world where people arrive with security convoys.
Yes. I arrived here on a bus. I know. Phoebe frowned. You know? I've seen you at the gate. Of course he had noticed that too. She shook her head. This is exactly what I mean. Your life and mine aren't just different.
They're ridiculous together.
Damien considered that.
Then he said, I'm not asking you to enter my world.
Phoebe looked up. I'm asking whether I can spend time in yours.
That silenced her. No promise of diamonds.
No offer to rescue her from work.
No suggestion that loving him meant becoming someone else.
Just a question. Phoebe felt something inside her loosen. And what happens to my job?
If this goes anywhere, we'll handle it properly. You will never have to wonder whether saying no to me threatens your livelihood.
The answer mattered, maybe more than anything romantic he could have said. Damien took another careful breath.
I don't want another borrowed day, Phoebe.
Her eyes burned. What do you want? To start again. He extended his hand, not commanding, offering. Damien DeMarco.
Phoebe stared at his hand before slowly placing hers in it.
Phoebe Sullivan.
His fingers closed gently around hers.
Would you have coffee with me? She raised an eyebrow. Is this how mafia bosses ask women on dates? Apparently. And if I say no? I ask once and accept the answer. Phoebe smiled. Then yes.
Something warm entered his eyes. But, she added, I'm choosing the coffee shop.
Damien nodded solemnly.
I suspected there would be conditions.
That's not a contract. No. Phoebe squeezed his hand. Good. They finally stepped into the elevator.
No engagement, no pretending, no borrowed boyfriend, just two people standing side by side, uncertain of what came next. And for the first time, uncertainty felt less like something Phoebe needed to fear.
It felt like a beginning.
Months later, Evelyn watched Phoebe and Damien exchange real engagement rings. Tears brightened her eyes.
Now I can finally stop worrying. Damien kissed Phoebe's forehead. Tomorrow, you won't need to borrow a boyfriend anymore. Phoebe smiled through her tears. Because I already found my forever.